All right, welcome to another episode of Same Blood. I'm Tim Urban, and today I'm joined by Mr. Ben Chavez. Now, I've never met you before today.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is really interesting, because the other people I've talked to, I've known a bit, at least. But I've never met you before today, but I was told about you by my brother, who you know. Yeah. I don't even know how you know him, but he said, we should talk to Ben Chavez. So here we are. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Jed, for inviting me. I actually know Jed because of Rachel, his wife. We went to the same high school. We became really good friends, and through that friendship, I think Jesus Christ was really able to reach me, because I was kind of a lukewarm Catholic, and even though she was Protestant, goes to Faith Bible Church, her love for the Lord was just really inspiring. So, thanks be to God.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
I do want to let you guys know, if you're watching, you're obviously wearing a mask right now.
Yes.
I asked Ben if he'd be more comfortable if I was wearing a mask, because it's totally fine, and you said that didn't really care.
Yeah, so I'm wearing it just out of charity for my family that I'll be going back to after this. Just responsibility, and I know that I have the responsibility to the Diocese of Dallas as well. So I have like a supervisor who's kind of asked us to be careful and just kind of limit our the amount of people we meet, and when we do, to be cautious. So for that reason.
So I didn't give him a hug. I didn't shake his hand.
True story.
We came in, we sat down.
That's right. I know.
And we're going to talk. All right, so the whole idea about Same Blood is this idea that it's people, not politics. It's not about trying to find things that divide. It's about understanding that we have a lot more in common than we have that separates us.
Sure.
And that it's important to start there, and then you can talk about maybe things that are a little more complicated, a little more difficult.
Yeah.
We've started the other videos with a kind of a snack, a favorite snack, and Ben told me it was frozen mangoes, but obviously we're not going to take the mask off and eat frozen mangoes. We have some frozen mangoes out there.
He can eat frozen mangoes.
I can do that. And so I might do that later, but we're not going to actually start the video with that. But if you want to try frozen mangoes as a snack, that's where it's at.
I recommend it.
Not straight out of the freezer though, right? Let them.
Yeah, let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes.
There you go. That's the easiest recipe you're gonna get for a snack ever.
That's right.
All right, so a couple of favorites for you. Favorite music, or favorite? I'm sorry, not favorite music. Well, favorite music. We can start there. We haven't start there with anybody else, but favorite music.
Oh man, like genre or
yeah.
What do you want? Yeah. So
I guess here to be. If you're just gonna sit down and listen to music, like what are you gonna click on? The quickest thing you're gonna click on just to listen to, just to relax.
Just to relax. Probably some folk.
Okay.
I like Bears Den. They're kind of like the Lumineers.
Yeah.
Kind of like that, but a little more mellow. Honestly, I love listening to choral music and classical music. For like chill.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so movies. That's one we've talked to a lot of people about. Are you a big movie guy? And is there a favorite?
So, my favorite... if I had to choose, and I always say this, I always choose a trilogy, and it's Lord of the Rings. By far, cinematography, music.
They're so good.
The story, it's just so rich. And that's just because, it's probably one of the best adaptations from a book on the screen.
We used to do every towards the end of the year, we do a big movie marathon, my family, and a group of us would go over to one of my family's house, and we'd spend an entire day watching the original trilogy, right? We'd spend all day, because obviously, and we have the extended versions.
Yeah.
And so we'd plow through all of those in a day, and it was so much, and it was ridiculous, and you come out of it like you're stepping back into reality.
Yeah.
But it was so much fun, because you just got a room full of people who are just, hanging out, watching a movie, having a good time. I loved it, man. I read those books so many times. They're so good. So good. Such a fan of that. Very cool. I approve. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
No, listen, that's not like a quick, easy watch. It's not like hey, be awesome. Let's watch the trilogy today.
Yeah.
No, it's commitment.
Yeah,
yeah. Definitely worth the time. All right. Are you a sports guy?
I am a sports guy.
All right. Favorite sport, favorite team?
So I love soccer. I love watching soccer. I love playing soccer. I also enjoy playing volleyball and a little bit of tennis. Not too good at tennis, but I enjoy it. Actually, I just got into frisbee golf, and I am hooked.
Frisbee golf is so much fun. Super underrated.
Yeah.
But there's like, I think it's because if you're really bad at it, it's gonna be awful for you. Like if you don't know how to throw a frisbee, don't start with frisbee golf.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to start learning, and then you can get into it.
Exactly.
But once you do, it's a lot of fun. I used to play all the time with some friends. So frisbee golf, yeah, that's a good one right there. Only problem is for me, as I'm always trying to chug it as hard as I can, and so if I play a lot, my shoulder gets a little pissed off at me.
Rotator cuff.
Yeah. Definitely worth it though. It's good times. Are you a hammer throw or regular?
Oh man, I just started, so I just do the backhand right now.
That's the way to go. All right, cool. So you are a seminarian.
That's right.
Which means that you are not. It's not. So what you were explaining to me earlier, because I asked you about this a minute ago. It's a longer process than people might expect. So kind of explain what are you doing right now?
So I'm in formation to become a Catholic priest, and in that is 4 dimensions that are focused on intellectual, pastoral, human, and spiritual. And there's a kind of theology that goes behind their integration and how they're connected. But I mean, it's academically, it just looks like bachelor's degree, master's degree.
And what year are you in right now?
I'm in second theology, so that's year 6. But I did transfer in with some credits, and so that kind of took a semester off, actually.
Right.
Ended up. But yeah, so I've been about 4 years in formation.
Where did you grow up? Are you from DFW or did you grow up somewhere else?
Yeah, I'm from Oak Cliff, right off Loop 12. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the area.
No, I am. I grew up in Duncanville, so that's not too far away from where I grew up. So tell me, this is something I think is really interesting for a lot of people. I don't know, interesting, but I think it's important. Growing up, early role models, people you looked up to, people that had an influence on your life.
Wow, okay. I would say definitely in childhood is in 5th grade I had a theology teacher who was, theology, I mean, it's really just sort of religion class. But religion class sounds really secular and really, really distant. So I would say it's like a class on living the Christian life.
Right.
And that's what he taught. He was enthusiastic about his faith. He was really good at teaching and engaging us students. And because my mom was also teaching at that school, I'd be there before school started and after school started, or after school ended. And so I would sometimes go hang out with him. And so he was a really good father figure, role model, kind of older brother too, because I grew up with 3 older brothers. And so, And so I just remember learning a lot about my faith during that 1 year of living the Christian life. And I remember especially learning about the saints, some of the greatest people who have walked the earth and are sort of living commentaries on the gospel, sort of representing Jesus Christ to the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so important to me that for people growing up that you have you're so moldable at a young age, and unfortunately you're going to get molded by whatever you're around. And so it's interesting to hear what people where the role models have been when they were younger, because you can see how much that sticks with people for good or for bad, depending on what you're around. If you're going to be, there are going to be role models in your life, whether they're positive or negative. But to have one in there, it's going to stick around a lot more maybe than even some stuff you get exposed to at a later point. Yeah. So very cool. Now this is something that I'm trying to see the world more through other people's eyes. All right. That's kind of one of the big reasons for doing this. And I think a lot of people are trying to do that right now. And so I think about things that I've experienced that are negative, right? Or that are difficult for me, or just negative experiences. And I'm realizing that those are not universally shared necessarily. There are different things that people experience that are negative, that really impact their lives, and that you don't really know unless you kind of talk to people about it.
Sure.
So is there something specifically in your life, like a negative experience that sticks out for you that's had like the biggest impact on your life?
Wow, man, digging deep.
As much as you want to share.
Yeah. So you got to use prudence. And a negative experience that impacted my life. Yeah, I feel comfortable sharing this. So I do remember, and it's impacted my life. I don't want to say it's just been negative, but let's just say in my family, like when I was little, just a lot of turmoil, a lot of fighting. I remember my parents would fight. I remember my older siblings would fight. And so I guess I was always, and I guess maybe even still am, just like sensitive. And so like when that stuff was going on, it just like really bothered me, made me like afraid. And so, yeah, I remember one time just, I guess after a big fight, my dad left, to just go be away for a little bit, kind of cool down. And, yeah, when I was a kid, I just remember thinking like, man, like, is he, to me as a kid, I didn't know if he was ever coming back. And so that was like really, really hard. Me and my brother, who were really close in age. I have two other brothers who were not as close in age, but I guess weren't. I don't know. Well, I wasn't. I guess I wasn't with them when it happened, so I don't know how they reacted. But yeah, I just remember crying and just being like kind of mourning over his loss.
Yeah.
At a young age, so I remember that, and so like a kind of theme I think in my life is something that I think that has probably even prevented me from sort of really coming to know like the Father's love for me, is a kind of like fear of abandonment. And so that's actually something I've had the opportunity to allow the Lord to address and kind of heal. I just went on an 8-day silent retreat, which, if you're not familiar with retreats, usually, generally like the general understanding is like, yeah, you go and you spend time alone, intentionally in prayer. If it's secular, maybe they just like mean more spiritual kind of stuff, or psychological. And there's a degree of that where like once you enter into both exterior and interior silence, things come up, not just like things of the soul, like things that pertain to our deepest, the deepest part of us, but things that are the not so deep parts, that we just kind of perhaps hear and ignore, or just never hear at all. So yeah, thanks be to God for that opportunity. But yeah, if that answers your question.
No, absolutely. 100% does. My wife actually told me about the study she saw, that it's sort of what you were just talking about, like the thoughts that stick around, right? And sometimes they're from the things that have been around for your whole life, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons I ask, is because I know there's different things that I've experienced that stick with me, right? They still influence my mind. There's things that I've had to work through, same way, right? That just to impact it, to allow me to just move forward. I realize I'm carrying something around, a view or a impact, and it's impacting my relationship with other people, impacting other things. And it's just because of something that happened, like a difficult situation or something I had to overcome. And I realized that most people are doing that to some extent or another. But you mentioned getting silent. And my wife, she told me about this study where they asked a bunch of people. They said, all right, so you have to choose to spend 15 minutes in total silence with your thoughts, or electric shock. Like majority of them chose electric shock. Yeah. And I was like, wow. Yeah. You know what? That really cements even more to me the fact that we need to talk to each other, because if you're carrying around that kind of weight, which everyone to an extent is carrying around something in their mind that that's there, and you don't know why, you don't know what it's there for, but it's impacting how they interact with you and other people. Mm-hmm. And it's important to understand that I don't know what that is for you unless I talk to you. Mm-hmm. And even then, even if I don't know, I need to understand it and be communicating with you through the lens of you have things that are impacting you, and I need to be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
I need to be sympathetic to that.
Yeah.
And when I have the conversation, not just to assume that like, oh, we've had the exact same experience with life, and so you should understand where I'm coming from and be totally, same page.
Right.
It doesn't work out that way.
Yeah.
So, and that's honestly one of the biggest reasons I ask, is because I think a lot of people can relate to that. Because a lot of people most people are carrying around something like that and have experienced something like that they then have to overcome. Sure. And it impacts their life in a really powerful way. So I appreciate you sharing that, because it is a very personal question. All
right.
That's kind of the idea.
Yeah. Can I ask you to share
so
something in your life?
No, 100%. Absolutely. So actually there's a couple things that like overcoming. One was growing up, I was incredibly scared of talking in front of people, which doesn't sound like that's a huge thing, except I was so scared that I would like shake and cry. Yeah. If I had to, right? And it was because I had a really, really, really bad, I had really low self-esteem, but it wasn't just like, I had such a terrible view of myself, and it sort of came from that and out of that. It was like the reason for it, and then that added to it. Right. And it affected me for a very, very, very long time. And it affected how I interact with other people, because I'm assuming that I'm walking up to people assuming that there's no reason for you to care about me, because like I'm just less than, right? I'm just assuming like this is who I am. And so I communicate with people, and I just got really sort of scared and terrified and inside myself. And eventually there was sort of a situation, American Idol was on that 10 years ago, and all of a sudden you're thrown in front of a bunch of people, and it was an opportunity where, for me, it was my relationship with Christ, where I was like, I don't know why I'm here, but I'm here, and I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to open up and go. It's terrifying, but I'm going to do this, and we're going to see what happens. Yeah. And so the experience was awesome, but it was really like what I learned from it, what I got from that as a person, was a lot of like, just, you're not less than. Nobody's created to be less than. That's not your identity. That's right. Just because it's an experience or something you feel does not mean that's who you are. And so that was something that, and even over the, since American Idol, since those years, it's been something that's been just more and more etched away from me. And I realized how much that affects how I interact with other people. Because if I view myself as less than, then I'm not approaching you and understanding your value, because I don't understand mine. So if I'm holding myself in this negative light, then I can't really understand who you are, what your value is.
That's right.
And so that's been one of the biggest things for me that sort of followed my life, and I've watched what it was and then what it's sort of changed into. Wow. And how it's impacted how I interact with the world, and that's one of the reasons I ask people, because that's there. Yeah. And I think it's important to understand. Right now you've I'm assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, in what you're doing in your training in your seminary, you've interacted with a lot of people. A lot of potential diversity in that situation, as far as backgrounds, life story, experiences. Yeah. So right now, as kind of a culture, we're sort of ripped apart and not sure what to do about diversity, right? Not sure like what this even looks like anymore, or it seems that way. At least if you follow social media, it seems like nobody knows what that looks like anyway. Yeah. So my question to you is, where have you seen diversity work? Like where have you seen, or how have you seen it be a positive thing, and how have you seen it work? Or have you?
All right. This is where I make my pitch. I've seen diversity work best in the Catholic Church. Okay. The church is old, and she's everywhere. She's all over the world. And you can see people from different cultures. You can see people in Japan, people in India, people in Croatia, Rome, United States. You can see them come to the same, and you really get a sense of this when, I don't know if you've heard of World Youth Days, that the Pope will host in different cities around the world. And you just see you see people from all those countries and more here for the same reason, and that's Jesus Christ. And that's, you just get a sense of like, we are the church. and the kingdom of God is among us. And so, and then even to the praise of God for like what Jesus truly spoke in the Gospel of John, like when Jesus said, I look around and the wheat is white, ready for harvest. And he said that after encountering the Samaritans.
Right.
So that's where I've seen it work the best. Because there's a respect, and there's, even within those specific cultures, there's an integrity of the faith and that culture. What we call, we call it enculturation. A better way to put it, as one theologian says, is interculturation, where the faith, the tradition of the faith, our faith, our Christian faith, over time has the ability to rehabilitate things in other cultures that are bad or are misleading or can be a stumbling block to God. And likewise, there's a richness available in each culture that the gospel can access and sort of come to expression. And so, but you have to respect cultures, because as our rector at seminary says, cultures come from God, because God created man, and I think culture reflects our higher nature, right? Our intellect, and our kind of ability to capture the transcendent from within, and that's the only way you can. But authentically, from a human perspective, to capture it, the transcendent, and to pass it on to your posterity.
That's a fantastic way to think about culture. That's awesome, and I love that. I think I know for me, just in general, and I think a lot of people probably approach it the same way. Maybe I'm wrong, but you see different cultures. Some you understand more, others you don't. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of where you go. You're like, I get where that is. I don't understand what's happening here.
Right.
And you sort of just go there. Uh-huh. But understanding that there's a lot of depth, and there's a reason for cultures, mm-hmm. And it's a really, it's an expression of something that's much more than just, I don't know what they're wearing. I don't get that. Right. But it's you don't, just because you don't know, but you should know, because there's value. There's a reason they do it, and mm-hmm. it's interesting, and it's worth learning, because it's not just the thing they happen to do. It's something that carries a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
But it's also very, to me, it's very interesting. And we'll see how this plays out over the course of the podcast and the stories. Sure. Just from the few we've done, and then other conversations, it seems to me that one of the places you find the most unity is when you aren't as concerned about where the people came from specifically, because you're not united on something else.
Exactly.
And then you bring your differences, you bring your different opinions, your different experiences, your different cultures, you bring them into this where you find unity, but that's where the unity is found, in something else.
Yes.
And in God, in Jesus, and that's why I think it's so important to not lose sight of that, because I think we're, as a society, we're sort of pulling these different things apart and trying to identify ourselves just on these things that you can't have unity on if we're just going to focus on that.
Yeah.
Because you just want to focus on the thing that makes you different than me.
Yeah.
The thing that we can't have in common, because I can't have your heritage.
Right.
Just can't, it's not possible, mm-hmm. But I can appreciate, I can understand it, and we can come together on something else, and you can bring what you are bringing, I bring what I'm bringing, and then it can be wonderful. Mm-hmm. It can be a really beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. So that's awesome. I love that answer. And I appreciate the way you're approaching these answers. I can tell you're not, there's no quick answer here. There's
I don't know if Jen told you anything about me, but I love philosophy. So
hey, honestly, I think it's great.
Yeah.
I love it. Because it shows that you actually care about this stuff, and not just that you care about it, but that you're getting this from, and you're getting a lot of information from other sources as well, mm-hmm. and you're taking into account other things that you've seen, read from people you respect. So, very, I don't know. That's incredibly valuable to me. Okay, so a question that I think is very important to ask, but I don't know what the right answer is necessarily. Diversity, right? And being open to other people's experiences, other things that they've seen done, or other points of view.
Right.
Is that something you pursue? Learning other people's perspectives, hearing where they're coming from, broadening your standpoint just to the understanding of like where people are coming from. Do you do that, or how does it look to you?
So to just kind of bring it down from the immediate sort of context of like, engaging in politics and
right,
and things like that. First and foremost, something I've sort of learned and experienced just from this past summer. And what I've been doing this summer is living in community with 15 other seminarians. 3 days a week we do work. So we've been doing work projects at the retreat center we've been staying at. The seminary has maintenance stuff that needs to be taken care of, so some will go there. And then we've also been sending guys to Catholic Charities to go help with the food pantry. So 3 days a week we do that. 2 days a week in the mornings we will go to downtown Dallas and we'll do homeless ministry. And it's about as straightforward as it seems, but is about as contrasting to everything else we do in our society as black and white, because it's in our short training, a couple guys from Denver with Christ in the City came and they sort of did training with us. Some of it was practical, like these are things like you do, this is what it's going to kind of be like generally, because I've done it so much. These are things to look out for, which are just a few things. It's normally common sense, like if it feels strange, it's probably strange. If it's dangerous, something like that. But beyond that was their emphasis on sort of building a culture of encounter. Not, in the, macro sense, but in the micro sense, like in me, like build a culture of encounter in myself. And so that means when you meet somebody, like you meet them. And I think very much in line with what you're doing with this podcast is what we were doing on the street with these homeless people who I myself can attest to it just from my own actions for most of my life. They experience just kind of being in the background. They are just a part of the landscape. They're a part of the city itself. And so this ministry, especially because I've had similar experiences in ministry, or attempts, I guess, but the Lord works with whatever. Where before it was like, well, am I going with an agenda? Am I going to try and convert them? Am I going to try and share the kerygma? Like, am I proclaiming the gospel to them? Okay, at what point do I start doing that? And this really overly mechanic sort of system and formula, and because that's how we kind of do literally everything else. Schooling and healthcare. It's always like formulaic and mechanic, and it's like, it's a mechanism. So if you can fix the problem in the mechanism, then bam. That's how we do politics. And so I think actually all the problems in the world, at least in the United States, are probably due to this overly mechanistic view of man and the phenomena that follow from him, such as culture, society, politics, and the one that should be uniting him, religion. He's kind of turned his back on and sort of turned towards mechanism. Anyway, so huge tangent. Let's just bring it back.
Okay, we're coming back.
Culture of encounter.
I know where you're going with that, and
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of that premise. It makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But back to what we're talking about.
Back to culture of encounter within myself. So all of a sudden it's no longer a matter of like, well, what do I do? And really the sufficient answer for that is just I mean, you can say it in theological terms. You can say, I mean, which are true, right? Like be Jesus to them. Like, and I would pray that. So we'd spend time in prayer before we would go and do ministry. And so that would be part of the prayer and part of this preparation. But I mean, it is just like, hey, like, how are you doing? Like, you want some water? And then hopefully from there, like, hey, you want some water? Because they never, like, they don't have like real relationships. And that's the underlying cause of probably 99.9% of all homelessness is ruptured relationships. From a material perspective, it makes sense. You and I have a lot of safety nets if we were ever to just hit rock bottom where we wouldn't have to end up on the streets.
Right.
So materially, okay. But there's also, like, in the chronically homeless, those who do not avail themselves of social aids they want to stay there. Part of it is like, well, they're not really all there to like make that competent free choice. And that includes like addiction. But on top, underlying even that is ruptured relationship. There's like their family hates them, abusive father, no father, abusive mother, huge fight. A lot of people who were in the military. I actually just spoke to a veteran that was in Vietnam, and he said, I was in school to like go teach music, and grew up in Arkansas, and then he was drafted in the Army. And he said after that, I didn't want to teach no more. I didn't want to be around kids. All I wanted to do was drink, chase women, just kind of hang around, just because of the horrific things he saw. So there's a lot. There's a lot, and because there's a lot, there is, I guess perhaps it's overwhelming. I guess people are overwhelmed and they're like, well, I don't want to deal with it. It's not my responsibility. It's not my problem. It's just an individualistic approach to the world, and the very thing that Christ came to cast out, to love your enemy. So like, if someone's not your enemy, a fortiori, you should be loving them and giving them yourself, just the way that Christ gave himself for us. So, culture of encounter. I think that's step one to just even having conversations with people is just loving them. Because in that sense of belonging is what we're missing. Just to go back to the more political, more
right
casual side, that sense of belonging is missing. So, I mean, it is like, well, you're my enemy, so we don't belong. Well, it's like, the only reason you're having this conversation is, well, you're both Americans.
Right.
So you belong to something, whether or not you like the situation.
Right.
But once again, I mean, being American is insufficient ground for that type of dialogue.
Right.
Needs to be rooted in God. And then what else needs to be rooted in God? The government and politics and policy.
Everything
needs to be rooted in God. So that, I mean, and that's it. The answer is Jesus. Okay.
Hey, no, look. Honestly, that's the thing. That's the reason I love asking that question is because the answer I think that I've seen from a lot of people, right? Now, we get there a lot of different ways, potentially. But the answer I've seen with a lot of people is that, like, as far as diversity, it's a lot of it has to do with being available, being open, and caring about other people, right? Like, I want to get to know you as a person, as an individual. Like, if I'm closed off, whether it's just somebody else's opinion, somebody else's thoughts, somebody else's life, then of course I'm not going to even understand the diversity of other human experiences. and that's not going to help anybody. You're just going to get continually entrenched in your own space, your own thoughts, your own existence, and that's not really where you're going to find unity. You're not going to find anything to come together on.
You're not going to find the person you're trying to reach. You're going to, because
we're not really trying to reach each other.
Exactly.
We're trying to be right, and we're trying to win arguments, and we're trying to make the other person stop talking before we stop talking, so that we've won the argument and we can leave and say, guys, I won the argument.
Yeah.
And you don't care that what you really did is you just convinced another person you don't care about them, and you aren't interested in them, their life, their story, or what's going to happen to them the moment they leave the conversation.
Or worse, they are somehow convinced by what you're saying, and then they go forth believing, this is what I must do to everyone I encounter.
Right.
Is I have to treat them the way I was treated.
Yeah.
I have to defeat them. And then once I defeat them, then they can go forward and tell others,
we can go conquer the world by beating down people with our opinions endlessly.
Yeah.
See, that's the message of Same Blood, is find your opinion, get really entrenched in it, and then beat down every person you see with it until they either agree with you or leave. And then copy and paste.
Copy and paste.
Is that's a terrible, when you say it out loud, it's a terrible, like, obviously you just think that is just going to wreak devastation. Turns out that is correct. That will wreak devastation. It'll wreak brokenness. It'll reap all of these different things that we're seeing right now, because that's how we've actually approached life.
Yeah.
And it's a problem. Mm-hmm. It's not good. So I think I already know the answer to this. I think I know what you're going to say here, Ben, but we'll just see. So how do you fix everything?
How do you fix everything?
Yeah, how do you fix everything?
Would a synonymous question be like, how do you make a success out of this, like, sort of brokenness? How do you make change and say, okay, I made change, I fixed it, it was successful?
Yeah.
I think, like, we're not called to, like, fix it. We're just called to be faithful. So it's what it is. We just got to be faithful to what God wants us to do, and that's what's in front of us. It's easy to get distracted with doing 10,000 other things that we're not supposed to do, and very easy to neglect the one thing we are supposed to be doing. And not to say that God's will is always this, like, it's always one thing, and, like, if you don't eat that orange today,
right?
You don't eat those frozen mangoes,
right?
No,
the whole thing's messed up.
Yeah, the whole thing's messed up.
We'll get the mangoes. We'll do the mangoes. All right, we already did.
Yeah, but there is, it's in Catholic social teaching, it's called the principle of subsidiarity, so that the most immediate group is the one responsible and should be the first one. If there's a problem, those in most immediate authority are the ones to take care of it, many of which we've sort of forgotten about. The parents, because of the breakdown of the family, both culturally, but also, like, and I think, and I think this is to get kind of a little bit political. I don't know if you've seen the documentary on Netflix, 13th. It's about the 13th Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty interesting. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, it's pretty interesting. It's pretty good. I always wondered, like, okay, like, you look at sort of violence, you look at poverty in Black communities, and they are overrepresented, right, in crime and in poverty, and you're like, well, what happened? It's like, well, I mean, okay, in a very, like, general sense, okay, they were enslaved at one point in our country. Okay, that okay, we kind of found the main source, right? But, like, what most immediately is the reason for this? Because and why is it still a thing, especially if it seems, right, like, if you just look around, like, I wouldn't say, like, oh yeah, I see racism everywhere. Right. It's pretty hidden from me, so it's not very apparent, except in the fact that there is an overrepresentation. And so one of the things that the documentary highlights, which is more of like a passing thing, but aside from their main points, but it's, and I think they attribute it to the mass incarceration of Blacks because of the war on drugs. So, like, people caught with minor Minor infractions were then sentenced to these disproportionate
Right.
amount of time in jail in order to fill prisons.
Right.
Because prisons were now sources
Make money.
Make money. Yeah. Private companies were now able to use the labor, which, I mean,
is a whole nother podcast.
That's a whole nother podcast. Anyway,
we'll probably get into that on another podcast.
But one of the things they pointed out was like, well, yeah, when you mass incarcerate a whole generation of men who had families and had children, you just created a whole generation of fatherlessness, which only perpetuates fatherlessness. And I was like, okay, now I kind of understand. That's why. I mean, I'm not saying that's the reason why there's so much fatherlessness, or so much crime. Like that's the reason, but it kind of reminded me and helped me understand where does crime come from ultimately, not just poverty. Because guess what? There's poverty in Guatemala and Nicaragua. I do not see the same thing. I mean, I'm not saying there are no criminals. No, there are. They call them ladrones. Like they have them, and and they.
Right.
But you see it in Mexico. You have the drug cartel. But what is it? Is it the poverty? No, it's the fatherlessness, and so I don't know what the question was. I don't know why I wanted to say that.
No, we're talking about how you like solutions, and I think you were just going down to where you see one of the biggest problems, and in one of the big issues that we face as a society. A country. And the thing is that's something that I've thought a lot about, because I hear a lot about just the fatherlessness, and the Black community, but in the entire country. Absolutely. Because one of the statistics I heard is that basically one of the biggest statistics that coincides with ending up in prison is whether you had a father in the home. Like that's statistically, if you pulled everything else aside, like that's going to be basically the number one thing that shows up. It's like the most common denominator is that. Yeah. And it cuts across kind of everybody. And you break down the family. It just is one of the things that has happened in our society. It's affecting different parts of our society more than others through a variety of reasons that we definitely can look at and need to look at, and things need to be addressed and changed. But that's like it's kind of a glaring thing that pops out a lot of times, is that you need families. Yeah. You need families together as much as possible. You need that to happen. It's and that it has a massive impact on people around us. Yeah. And back to what you were saying, you need God. It's important for a lot of people. You need God. Yeah. It matters. And honestly, what's the one solution? What's the one thing that everybody can right now go do and fix and do all that? It's like, I don't know that it's that simple, because everybody's walking around, and if you try to attach one solution to everybody, then you're doing the exact same thing that you just said not to do, which is to say that everybody is this, and I can just make one change in all of this, and it's going to fix everything. It's like, well, no, because I don't know you. I need to understand where you're at. Sure. That's one of the biggest takeaways I take away from this conversation, is just that, you have a heart for understanding people, like the person in front of you, the situation in front of you. You want to know, like, what's going on, what's the story here. And that's the heart of this podcast. This whole conversation that we're trying to have is understand the person across from you, understand where they're coming from, understand what their life is, where their struggles are, where their successes are, and if you can be a part of helping them move forward in a good way, if you can be a part of encouraging them. But you have to understand people first. You got to know who they are. You can't fix it, which is why as a quick aside, it's one of these, all of our homeless stuff has been so bad, is because it's a blanket stuff that doesn't work. Because there's a bunch of people with all these different stories and life experiences. And it's not a one size fits all. Because life isn't, people aren't. That's the whole point of a podcast of the stories, is that it's not a one size fits all life. It's not a one size fits all conversation. And if you treat it like that, you end up with a bunch of people feeling like they were never part of the conversation to begin with. And that's not the goal here. And I appreciate you coming on and adding a perspective that I certainly don't have from your life, from what you're pursuing right now. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And we'll see you guys on the next one.